I just got back from my first road trip with the Volvo, so it's time to change the oil. I also have everything I need to do a transmission flush as well, so we're going to do that at the same time. The transmission is behind the front left wheel, so I'm going to get that loosened while it's on the ground and then pull it off once the car's up in the air. Whenever you're taking a tire off, you should always loosen the lug nuts while the car is on the ground and has its full weight keeping it from moving. Unfortunately, this Volvo has lug bolts, which are really frustrating for taking wheels on and off. The transmission fill and drain plugs are both 24 mils, which I don't have, so I used a 15/16, which ended up working perfectly. Always make sure you can get the fill plug off first because you don't want to be stuck with a transmission that you can't refill. With the fill plug off, I tried to get this drain plug off with a crescent wrench, but that wasn't working out, so I had to try to squeeze the ratchet into a tight spot. Finally got everything loose. Based on the color and the smell of the fluid, it was definitely time to change it. After everything finished draining, I put a new crush washer on the plug and put it back in. I ended up filling the transmission with some Motul model gear. It was a good middle ground between the Redline MTL and the OEM Volvo fluid. The process for filling the transmission was kind of interesting. You basically buy this, what looks like a soap dispenser, to plug into the bottle, and you just pump the entire bottle into the fill plug. With the first bottle empty, I pulled out the pump and I plugged it into the new bottle. Annoyingly, this transmission takes 2.1 quarts of fluid, so I had to pop open another bottle to top it off. The way you know the transmission's full is when it starts dripping transmission fluid from the fill plug. With the transmission full, I popped on the fill plug and moved over to start changing the oil. Changing the oil on this car is pretty easy. The drain plug isn't hidden behind any panels or anything like that, so you can just get up underneath and undo the plug. The oil that came out was quite black, and I think that was in part because the car sat for so long, and this is the first time I ever took it on a nice long road trip and kept it at operating temperature for so long. That probably helped loosen up all the gunk and deposits that were within the engine, and this car should run a lot better going forward. Just like the transmission fill and drain plugs, this one also gets a new crush washer. The torque spec on this oil drain plug is about half an ugga-dugga. This Volvo doesn't use your typical spin-on oil filter, it's actually a cartridge that goes inside a plastic housing. The filter also comes with a new O-ring that you replace every time as well. This oil filter housing is impossible to get off with anything other than this exact socket. You can't use generic oil filter tools because they won't get it off. You don't have enough space to get in there around the filter to get it off. How do I know? This is my second oil filter housing. Before putting on the new filter, I wipe away all of the excess oil, and then I pop the new filter right on. I slide the old gasket off of the oil filter housing and slide the new one on. Back on goes the oil filter housing. Apparently there's a torque spec for this, but I just gave it a quarter of an ugga-dugga. For oil, I just use high mileage full synthetic. It really doesn't matter what you use, just make sure you have the right oil weight. My car takes 6.13 quarts of oil with a filter, so I filled up with 5 quarts and then finished off with the second bottle. As you can see, I poured in a little over a quart. I put everything back together and put the car back on the ground to check the oil level. The oil level was right in between the X's, so we were good to go. The biggest issue I was having with the transmission is that it wasn't shifting very well when it was cold, so I waited till the next day to take it out for a drive, and it drove beautifully.